At 12:53 a.m. on September 22, 1979, the world almost ended, and for 45 years, governments have pretended it never happened. An American Vela surveillance satellite orbiting 70,000 miles above the South Atlantic detected a double flash of light so distinctive, so unmistakable that it could only mean one thing: someone, somewhere, had just detonated a nuclear weapon. The signature was perfect. A blinding initial burst followed milliseconds later by a second, slower flash as the fireball expanded and cooled, creating what nuclear weapons experts call the bang meter signal. It was the exact pattern American satellites had been trained to detect since the height of the Cold War, and in the tense geopolitical climate of 1979, this single detection threatened to ignite a global crisis that could have ended civilization as we know it. The Vela satellites were America's silent sentinels, launched throughout the 1960s and 70s with one terrifying purpose: to catch any nation foolish enough to test nuclear weapons in secret. Equipped with advanced optical sensors and designed specifically to detect nuclear detonations from space, these satellites had never given a false alarm, not once. Their bang meter technology was so sophisticated, so precise, that it could distinguish between lightning, meteors, solar flares, and the unmistakable optical signature of a nuclear explosion. When Vela 6911 transmitted its data back to Earth that September morning, military analysts at the U.S. Air Force Technical Applications Center didn't just see numbers on a screen. They saw evidence of what appeared to be a small tactical nuclear weapon, estimated between 2 and 3 kilotons, detonating somewhere in the remote waters between South Africa and Antarctica. But here's what made intelligence officials across Washington lose sleep for years. Nobody claimed responsibility. No nation came forward. No radioactive fallout was definitively detected. No seismic readings confirmed a blast. And yet, the satellite data remained stubbornly, impossibly consistent with a nuclear detonation. Within hours of the detection, the White House was briefed. The CIA launched an immediate investigation. Naval vessels were quietly redirected. Reconnaissance aircraft began sweeping the suspected area. Because if someone had successfully tested a nuclear weapon in secret, if a nation had developed the bomb without the world knowing, then every assumption about global security, every treaty, every carefully balanced deterrence strategy could collapse overnight. The theories began immediately, each more unsettling than the last. Had apartheid South Africa, increasingly isolated and desperate, finally unveiled its secret nuclear program? Had Israel, long suspected of possessing undeclared weapons, conducted a clandestine test in collaboration with the South Africans? Or had a non-state actor somehow acquired nuclear materials and technology? The Carter administration formed a secret panel of scientists and intelligence experts to investigate what would become known simply as the Vela Incident. But the more they dug, the deeper the mystery became, and the more impossible it seemed that they would ever know the truth about what really happened that night over the dark, empty ocean, when for 2 brief flashes, the sky lit up with the power to destroy cities. While intelligence agencies scrambled to figure out who just lit up the South Atlantic with nuclear fire, the evidence kept pointing to 2 nations most people didn't even know had nuclear ambitions. Within 72 hours of the flash, American intelligence had assembled a disturbing profile, and what they discovered suggested a secret nuclear partnership that had been operating in the shadows for years. South Africa, facing international condemnation for its apartheid regime and cut off from conventional arms suppliers, had been quietly developing nuclear capabilities since the early 1970s at its Pelindaba facility near Pretoria. Israel, surrounded by hostile neighbors and determined never to face another existential threat, had been pursuing its own clandestine nuclear program since the 1960s, with its suspected weapons development centered at the Dimona complex in the Negev desert. Intelligence reports from the CIA and Mossad insiders suggested these 2 pariah states had formed an unspoken alliance, sharing technology, expertise, and most critically, a mutual need for plausible deniability. Whoever did this wasn't just lucky, they were surgical. They waited for a new moon. They picked the most desolate patch of ocean on the planet. They literally waited for the clouds to hide the evidence. September 22nd fell during the new moon phase, ensuring maximum darkness over the South Atlantic. The location, approximately 1,500 miles southeast of South Africa's Prince Edward Islands, was one of the most remote and uninhabited stretches of ocean on Earth. No commercial shipping lanes, no nearby land masses, no witnesses. Weather records showed heavy cloud cover that night, providing natural concealment from ground-based observation. To intelligence analysts, this wasn't coincidence, this was planning. Someone had carefully selected the perfect moment and location to test a nuclear device with minimal chance of detection, and they had almost succeeded. Almost. But the evidence kept mounting in ways that made denial increasingly impossible. In late September and throughout October 1979, Australian and Japanese monitoring stations detected trace amounts of iodine-131 in atmospheric samples, a radioactive isotope with a half-life of just 8 days that occurs naturally in nuclear fission reactions. The isotope concentrations were low, maddeningly low, but they were there. Navy acoustic data, initially dismissed, was re-examined and showed an anomalous hydroacoustic signal consistent with an explosion in the suspected time frame. Scientists at Los Alamos National Laboratory analyzed the Vela satellite's data repeatedly, running it through every possible scenario, and each time reached the same conclusion. The probability of a natural phenomenon producing that exact double flash signature was so statistically unlikely that some scientists put the odds at less than 1 in 100 million. Then came the defector testimony that changed everything. In late 1979 and throughout 1980, multiple sources with alleged connections to South African and Israeli defense programs began providing fragments of information to Western intelligence agencies. They spoke of a joint operation codenamed Chalet, of a test conducted from a ship or submarine, of scientists celebrating a successful yield, of immediate efforts to sanitize all records. The specifics varied and the sources couldn't be fully verified, but the consistency of the core claims was deeply troubling. These weren't conspiracy theorists or attention seekers. These were individuals with legitimate access who were risking everything to reveal what they claimed was an illegal nuclear test. Yet officially, diplomatically, both Israel and South Africa issued blanket denials. And the Carter administration, facing an election year and countless other crises, found itself caught between the stark satellite evidence and the impossibility of proving definitively what had occurred in those 2 blinding flashes over the empty sea. In January 1980, the White House convened a special panel of scientists with an impossible mission: find a way to explain the Vela flash as anything other than a nuclear detonation. The panel, led by Dr. Jack Ruina of MIT and including some of America's most respected physicists and weapons experts, was tasked with reviewing all available data and providing the Carter administration with what many suspected would be political cover, a scientifically plausible alternative explanation that could diffuse the international crisis. What happened next would expose the fundamental conflict between scientific integrity and political convenience, and the panel's findings would spark controversy that persists to this day. The Ruina panel delivered its report in July 1980, and its conclusion was stunning. The official explanation? A tiny space rock hit the satellite. Just a cosmic coincidence. Wild, right? The panel called it a zoo event, an extremely rare collision between a small meteoroid and the satellite itself, or possibly a micrometeorite striking space debris near the sensor. They acknowledged the data looked remarkably like a nuclear signature, but argued that certain anomalies, the signal's unusual shape, the absence of a confirmed radioactive debris field, the lack of electromagnetic pulse detection, cast enough doubt to suggest an alternative explanation. Within hours of the report's release, the scientific community erupted in outrage. Except no one bought it, especially not the scientists who actually built the damn thing. The most damning critique came from Dr. Alan Berndon, director of research at the Naval Research Laboratory, whose scientists had designed and calibrated the Vela satellites. Berman publicly called the Ruina panel's conclusions flimsy and released a blistering technical rebuttal demonstrating that the satellite's sensors were specifically engineered to distinguish between nuclear events and all other phenomena, including micrometeorites, cosmic rays, and satellite malfunctions. The probability of a zoo event creating that exact signature they calculated was virtually zero. Several members of the panel itself privately expressed reservations about the majority conclusion. Dr. Cary Sublett, a nuclear weapons expert, later wrote and argued that the Vela satellites had detected 41 confirmed nuclear tests between 1969 and 1979 with 100% accuracy, and the September 22nd event bore all the hallmarks of detection number 42. The hydroacoustic data, reanalyzed by independent oceanographic institutes, showed a signal profile matching underwater shock waves from an explosion with a yield between 2 to 4 kilotons, exactly what the optical data suggested. But perhaps the most chilling revelation came years later, in the 1990s, when South African President F.W. de Klerk publicly admitted that his nation had developed and built 6 nuclear weapons during the 1970s and 80s before voluntarily dismantling them in 1991. South Africa, he confirmed, had been a nuclear power all along. When pressed about the Vela incident specifically, de Klerk denied South African involvement in that particular test, but his admission proved that the capability, the motivation, and the secrecy had all been there. Israel, meanwhile, has maintained its policy of nuclear ambiguity to this day, never confirming nor denying its nuclear arsenal, a silence that many interpret as confirmation itself. The question remained, if not the Vela incident, then when and where did South Africa test its weapons? In 1997, nearly 2 decades after the flash, a former South African Navy officer named Dieter Gerhardt made a confession that would reignite the entire controversy. Gerhardt, who had been arrested in 1983 as a Soviet spy and served years in prison, revealed in a post-apartheid interview that he had transmitted intelligence to Moscow about a planned joint Israeli-South African nuclear test scheduled for September 22, 1979. According to Gerhardt, the operation involved Israeli scientists and military personnel working alongside their South African counterparts, with the test device loaded aboard a South African naval vessel that sailed into the remote South Atlantic. The detonation, he claimed, was meant to be a proof of concept, a demonstration that both nations possessed functional, deliverable nuclear weapons. His testimony was detailed, specific, and corroborated elements that had been whispered about in intelligence circles for years, but never officially confirmed. Then came the Israeli whistleblower. In 1999, Avner Cohen, an Israeli historian with access to former government officials, published a meticulously researched book titled Israel and the Bomb, in which he documented Israel's nuclear program based on interviews with dozens of insiders. While Cohen stopped short of definitively confirming Israeli involvement in the Vela incident, multiple sources he interviewed acknowledged that Israel had conducted at least one nuclear test during the late 1970s, and that collaboration with South Africa on nuclear matters was extensive and operational during exactly that timeframe. One former Israeli official told Cohen off the record that certain things happened in the South Atlantic that both nations agreed would never be discussed, a statement that Cohen interpreted as the closest thing to confirmation he would ever receive. The evidence from signals intelligence was equally damning. In 2015, declassified NSA documents revealed that American listening posts had intercepted communications between Israeli and South African frequencies in the days immediately before and after September 22, 1979. The content of those communications remains classified to this day, but the mere existence of the intercepts and the government's continued refusal to release them suggests information too sensitive for public disclosure, even 4 decades later.
Former CIA analyst Jeffrey Richelson, who spent years studying the Vela Incident, concluded that the weight of evidence points overwhelmingly toward a nuclear test, and the only plausible candidates with means, motive, and opportunity were Israel and South Africa, acting in concert. Yet official denial remained the order of the day. The U.S. government never formally reversed the Ruina panel's conclusions. Israel never acknowledged possessing nuclear weapons, let alone testing them. South Africa, despite de Klerk's admission of a weapons program, maintained that all 6 of its devices were dismantled without ever being tested. The conspiracy of silence held firm across 3 nations, 3 governments, and 4 decades, a silence that served everyone's interests. For the United States, admission meant acknowledging a massive intelligence failure and confronting allies over nuclear proliferation. For Israel and South Africa, admission meant international prosecution for violating the Partial Test Ban Treaty and the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So, the question became, if powerful governments needed the truth to remain buried, could the truth ever truly surface?
In 2018, a team of investigative journalists from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists compiled every piece of declassified evidence, every whistleblower testimony, every scientific analysis conducted over nearly 40 years, and reached a conclusion that most experts had privately accepted decades earlier. On September 22, 1979, someone detonated a small nuclear weapon over the South Atlantic Ocean, and the most likely culprits were Israel and South Africa, operating in a covert partnership. The journalists documented 19 separate pieces of corroborating evidence, from satellite data to radioactive isotope detection, from intercepted communications to defector testimony, each one individually circumstantial, but collectively forming a mosaic of proof that would convict in any court not bound by geopolitical considerations. Yet their exhaustive report changed nothing. No government issued new statements, no archives were opened, no officials came forward. The incident remained officially unresolved, suspended in a diplomatic twilight where everyone knows the truth, but no one can speak it. The Israeli nuclear weapons program, according to experts, now consists of estimates that range widely from 80 to 400 warheads, making Israel the world's 6th or 7th largest nuclear power, yet the nation has never confirmed a single weapon exists. South Africa remains the only country in history to have voluntarily built and then completely dismantled a nuclear arsenal, destroying its 6 weapons between 1989 and 1991 as apartheid collapsed and de Klerk feared they would fall into the hands of a black majority government. Whether one of those 6 devices was ever tested remains officially unknown, but weapons designers and nuclear physicists have long argued that building functional nuclear weapons without testing them is extraordinarily difficult and risky. Nations simply don't trust untested weapons to actually detonate when needed. The engineering margins are too narrow, the stakes too catastrophic. Dr. Frank Pabian, a nuclear imagery analyst, perhaps summarized the situation best in a 2016 interview. The Vela Incident represents everything that's wrong with nuclear secrecy. We have incontrovertible satellite evidence of an event that looks exactly like a nuclear test. We have motive, means, and opportunity for 2 specific actors. We have whistleblowers and defectors confirming it happened. We have scientific consensus that the alternative explanations don't hold water. And yet, because admitting the truth would be diplomatically inconvenient and legally complicated, we've all agreed to pretend we don't know what we know. It's not a mystery, it's a cover-up that everyone has accepted. The Vela 6911 satellite, the silent witness to whatever happened that night, continued orbiting Earth until it was finally decommissioned in 1984, its sensors having detected what its creators believed was its 42nd nuclear detonation. The data from September 22, 1979 remains stored in classified archives, reviewed periodically by intelligence analysts, but never officially reinterpreted. And somewhere in the dark waters of the South Atlantic, 1,500 miles from the nearest shore, the ocean keeps its secrets, secrets that involve 2 flashes of light,
two nations with everything to hide, and a moment when the world came closer to nuclear proliferation than it wanted to admit. The truth is out there. It's just that no one with the power to confirm it ever will. And honestly, maybe they're right to be scared, because once you admit one nation cheated the system, the whole house of cards starts to wobble. But it makes you wonder, if they can hide a nuclear explosion in the middle of the ocean, what else are we missing? Is the truth really out there, or is it just buried under layers of diplomatic convenience that we're all too polite to dig through? Drop a comment if you think the US knew all along and just looked the other way to protect their allies. Because honestly, the more you dig into this, the harder it is to believe anything they tell us. If you want to keep uncovering the mysteries they don't want you to know, the secrets hidden in classified files, the stories buried by governments, the truths that change everything, subscribe to Dark Dimensions X and hit that bell, because some mysteries deserve to be told, even when the powerful wish they'd stay silent forever.